let's find out if the woman that has something for you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've been
Glenn would
working with
know.
this.
Glenn, yeah.
It's great. And we were a little nervous about the stakeholder review. They were looking through it, and they came out with very specific feedback. But it shows me they looked through it all. They were looking at the
Hello,
nothing
hello, everybody.
concerns, which is great.
Please have a seat. I want to welcome you to the 9th Iron Tech Lawyer Competition, which is our 7th year of doing it. Don't ask me for an explanation. It's kind of an iPhone thing. But anyway, I'm Tanina Rothstein. For those of you who don't know me, I teach here at Georgetown Law Center. And as what you'll see is that my students have done all the work and will do all the work today. Oops. We'll do all the work today, and I'm going to function as the master of ceremonies. So the first person that I would like to introduce is our Vice Dean, Jane Aiken, who's going to welcome you.
This is exciting. I'm really looking forward to today. I hope I get to stay as much as I can. I do want to welcome you as well, as Tanina just did, to the 9th Iron Tech Lawyer Competition. I've been to a number of these. It's incredibly exciting. And what's critical to that is having very good judges, and we have terrific judges today. I want to introduce you to them. We have Erica Teasley Lennick, who's the Senior Program Officer of the U.S. Programs Democracy Team at the Open Society Institute. Thank you very much. William Augusto, who is the Director for the Domestic Violence Unit for the District of Columbia Superior Court. We're really happy to have you here, and obviously access to justice is a critical piece of what you do. And then, of course, Jim Sandman, who is the President of Legal Services Corporation, the federal funder of direct legal services for people of limited income around the country, and who has been one of the primary speakers about access to justice around the world. So we have the right people here to help us think through what we're doing around access to justice and to evaluate the kinds of things that are being produced. And frankly, I'm deeply impressed that we have you here and we have 6 really fantastic apps that you have produced in just one semester, which is an accomplishment in and of itself before this competition. It's a sort of remarkable thing. Now, it demonstrates your strength, but it also demonstrates that this is the brainchild of Tanina Rothstein, who has been doing this all this time, who made us start thinking about this and who has been a major player in thinking about the ways we can use technology to enhance access to justice, and this course really has moved us down there. Now, many of you may not know, but Tanina was selected, not surprisingly, as an ABA legal rebel. And then she was also selected as one of the top tech lawyers in the country and showing promise in the area of technology and law, which is the is obviously the cutting edge of what's happening today. There are 2 commitments that we have as an institution that really are manifest in this competition. One is our commitment to justice. The library says it, law is but the means, justice is the end, and this work is deeply rooted in the importance of justice. And the other is our commitment to understanding that right now it's really important for us to have a very good command of technology, because technology offers us a lot of solutions to the problem of access to justice, and to be ahead of that and to be thinking about that and to train lawyers to be nimble in the area of technology and law is critical. Now, this program, the creation of apps for access to justice, is just one of the programs we do around access to justice at Georgetown. So I just want to take this moment to do a little ad about Georgetown's access to justice. We have representatives here from the DC Affordable Law Firm, which is a really terrific commitment of this institution toward providing access to justice to those people who do not qualify for free legal services, but certainly can't afford lawyers. And it's going into its 4th year, and we are proud of what we are doing there. And the DC Affordable Law Firm is really on its way to providing us a model for access to justice for those people who are at 200 to 400% of poverty. We also have started in the last year the Georgetown Health Justice Alliance, which is this terrific combination of law students and med students working together to provide services to low-income people in Anacostia and at the the family shelter here in Washington, D.C. Really looking at the social determinants of health and how when you put lawyers and medical doctors together that you can actually solve people's problems in a much more profound way, providing yet again another access to justice. And then finally, Tanina has started something called the Justice Lab here at Georgetown, which really looks at this as broadly as possible and looks at it from a policy basis and also from an empirical basis. And we're lucky to have added Mary McClimate, who has joined the Justice Lab and is focusing on how non-lawyers who are self-represented clients. So really looking at that kind of service to improve access to justice, and she's our senior fellow at the Justice Lab. Obviously, this is on top of what we're already doing in clinical legal education, where we've added more clinics and now have even more ability to serve the community in which we're operating. So enough of the ad. I do want to mention one other thing, which is that this is an important area. This is just one of our technology courses. It's one of the most robust and one of the ones we're most proud of, but we're also offering 50 classes in technology, law, and policy here at this law school. It's probably the most robust curriculum in the country. We have now done coding for lawyers, and we're doing technology and privacy, in which we really look at the ways in which technology is created so that our students can have some facility with that as well. This group knows what we're talking about. This group has been doing that in the creation of apps, and I applaud your efforts, and I look forward to hearing what you're doing and having the judges be able to appreciate it. So thank you.
So a quick word about the class. We have students and teams who partner with outside organizations to build access to justice apps. For those of you who are interested, we put out an RFP in the fall and get a series of proposals that Mark O'Brien and I pick. I'm very proud, I should say, about the support that we've gotten at the Law Center from Jane and from the dean, because when I showed up here 6 years ago and said I wanted to teach a class like this, I was like, Tanina, do you know how to code? And I was like, no. So I feel really, really fortunate to be at Georgetown because of its commitment to access to justice and its commitment to thinking about technologies in the legal space. Let me hand it over to my partner in crime, Mark O'Brien, who is the founder and executive director of Pro Bono Net, and who teaches this class with me.
Great. Thanks very much, Tanina. I really appreciate it. I came a number of years ago when Tanina was first teaching the class. I came to give a guest lecture in the class and stayed. So, and it's been a great opportunity for a number of reasons. You know, Pro Bono Net is a nonprofit that works as our everyday work to think about how can technology and innovation change access to justice, change the capacity of legal organizations, the courts, and other justice actors to really open up and fulfill the promise of equal access to justice. And I think one of the keys that has kept me wanting to come back to this class has really been the way that the work that the student teams do has been embraced by many of those different institutions. We benefit not only from folks who are here today judging, but many people really kind of the best and brightest within the access to justice sector who do give lectures, Catherine Alternator from the Self-Represented Litigation Network, who's here today, as well as Jim Sandman participated in the class, but others from all over the country, Margaret Hagan, we had George Clement from Just Fix, who give the students an opportunity to think about what's the broader context in which the very specific apps and the very specific problems they're trying to help courts, public interest legal organizations work out through the software projects they're doing with them, but really get a better understanding of how this work fits into that broader ecosystem. I think it's something that infuses the work with value and worth and kind of gives a certain humility to what it is that technology can accomplish, even as I think you'll be very impressed by the work product that the students, and the thing that, I'm sure I have already looked at these apps and I think there's terrific products out there, but I really want to underline what I think the contribution these student teams have already made in working with the 6 organizations. And I'm really delighted this year that the organizations that have partnered with the class this year really do represent kind of a broad range of justice actors. So you'll see some traditional legal aid organizations, but also courts and state agencies that are thinking about promoting civil legal services and access to justice in their state, have been able to use this class as an incubator to figure out, and really the service that the students have provided to those organizations and the tremendous gift that those organizations have made by working with the students, I think is really what the success of incubator projects like this are. And so with that, I'll get off the stage, welcome the students, and thank you all for joining with us today.
Another partner in crime. We've had a wonderful collaboration with Neurologic that started 7 years ago. That was part of my going to the dean and saying, can we do this? And his saying yes. Kevin Mulcahy co-teaches the class with us and is the director of education at Neurologic. And in the last 3 weeks, he has been amazingly available to help students add things, fix things, build on things. And I really appreciate the wonderful relationship that we've had all these years.
Thank you, Tanina. It's such a pleasure. This has been going on for quite a few semesters, and it's just wonderful to see it hit the speed that it's at now. And I want to congratulate you all. Your timing is perfect. You're entering the legal industry at a time of renaissance. It really is. You have so many opportunities now. You have these great power tools and machine learning and expert systems, and you've taken the step to learn how to take advantage of them. But all these tools are just platforms. They're really nothing without you applying your expertise and you being responsible for these things. So if you have friends and family who are worried about the robots taking over, say, no, it's going to be us, because you've learned how to leverage technology and you will be responsible for these products that you create and you can handle it. So there's really nothing to worry about as long as you're learning how to leverage the technology. That's what your generation in this profession needs to be concerned about, not technology running away. So congratulations and thank you for being artists, being engineers, being lawyers, being writers. We saw all of that, and we'll see all of that in your products that you're going to show today. Thanks.
Some thank yous to Alex Reeve-Givens, who is the amazing executive director of our Technology Law and Policy Clinic, to our wonderful TAs, Reed Dempsey, Rachel Everett, and Ethan Pale. They've had to put up with a lot, and not from you guys, from me. To our special events and wonderful AV staff, I do want to mark the absence of one person, Christopher Ballantyne, who passed away in the last year and who always was involved in this event in a graceful and thoughtful, and for me, very important, calm way. And so he's missed today, and I think at the law school every day. Alina Schmidt, who might be here, yay, Alina, who had the playbook and played exactly with the playbook. Thank you to our judges, and thank you to you guys, students. You have been amazing. We're very excited to see what you've done. I've already seen what you've done. It's really, really phenomenal. So thank you. Program should tell you everything. There's some loose criteria. The judges know them. They have unreviewable discretion. They can ignore them. And the basic time frame is 7.5 minutes for each team. We're very strict about keeping the time. 5 minutes to ask them questions. And we'll take a break after the first 3 teams go. We've got 6. And at 3:30, the social media poll will open, and you can get online through your phones or through our guest website. I think it's Go Hoya ! Or not, somewhere. Well, if you need it, we can find out the answer, but don't ask me. That's the password, but you can use your phones to get online and to vote. That begins at 3:30, and we will have a prize for the winner of our social media poll. And with that, I think I've told you everything you need to know and more, and I think these students are eager to get going and do some great presentations. So let me call up the first team, which is the Washington Referral Act, and it's Shushi Hovanesian, Crystal Jen, Zach Roman, and Jesse Sue.
I think they're muted.
All right, good afternoon. My name is Crystal.
I'm Shushi.
I'm Jesse. I'm Zach.
And this semester, we worked with the Washington State Office of Civil Legal Aid to create the Washington Referral App. And so, according to recent statistics, in the state of Washington, 1 person is victimized by crime every 6 minutes. Our app actually helps advocates to easily and efficiently find appropriate service providers based on a victim's specific needs. We set off with 2 goals in mind. First, we wanted to compile and organize over 300 service providers in one portal. And second, we needed to integrate that into a simple and easy-to-use interface. This slide is just a fraction of all the service providers available in Washington State, and we wanted to make sure that victims and advocates would fully utilize these resources. And so Shushi will actually talk more about who will benefit from the app.
Thank you. So Crystal just mentioned that our app intends to benefit victims of crimes and their advocates. Who are they? Adults, children, and elderly who have been harmed as a result of crime are victims and are often vulnerable in need of several diverse set of services. Our app intends to serve victims ranging from domestic violence, sexual assault, all the way to identity theft and fraud. So in seeking services, victims often approach advocates who either directly address their problems, their concerns, or refer them to an appropriate service provider. So generally, advocates are known to be members of an organization offering medical, legal, or any other kind of services to victims of crimes. However, whenever the victim's needs are beyond what the advocate can address, they need to make a very quick and timely referral. Yeah, sorry. And time becomes a concern. Victims are often very vulnerable, and they need to get their services, addressed. They need to get to their services immediately, so we don't want to discourage the victims from seeking help. So although our primary users will be the first two categories listed, the app is so simple and so easy to use that anyone, family, friends, and even complete strangers can pick up their phone, put on their advocate hat, and find services for the victim. I'm going to pass it on to Jesse now, who will talk more about the advocates and their involvement in building the app.
Thanks, Shushi. So I'm just going to run through some of the problems and solutions that we ran into while designing and developing the app. So in terms of problems, the main one that we ran into was how to incorporate this large data set of over 300 organizations in Washington State represented by this map into our app. Additionally, we found through our research that there were areas with service deserts or regions where there weren't many services available. So in those regions, it might be harder for advocates to actually locate services. So by centralizing all those organizations in one database, we hope that more accurate and better referrals will happen. So how did we solve these problems? First, a lot of it was just pure data input, taking all of these organizations, classifying them by region and type of service provided, and inputting them into a master spreadsheet, which our app then sorts based on the victim's specific location and need. And also, we want to stress that throughout this entire process, advocates were involved from the design, development, all the way through final user testing. So what do we mean by advocate consultation? Well, advocates desired a short and sweet app, something with plain language, but also something that they can look at in their palm of their hand on a phone while talking to victims. They also wanted a detailed referral page. So while we want the app to be simple, we want the referrals to be accurate by location and service type because advocates recognize that referral fatigue is a thing, and if victims are referred to multiple services that aren't the correct service, they might stop looking. Also, they were worried about victim safety because victims might be in a position where they're compromised or vulnerable with an abusive spouse, for instance. So we have an optional texting feature where through the app, you can have the organization's contact info texted to your phone, but that's totally optional. You don't need it. And also, we chose phone instead of email to incorporate the more private aspects. And finally, advocates tested the product at the end, and we're happy to say that because of all the work we did with them in the development, they enjoyed the app. And I made this meme because I thought it was funny. And this is just to underscore how easy it is to update the app. This is the master spreadsheet. If an organization is defunct, you can just remove them from the spreadsheet and the app will read that. And also you can add new organizations as you go along. And now I'll pass it on to Zach for the actual screenshots of the app.
Thanks, Jesse. So here is the application itself, minus our beautiful header, which we had to cut for PowerPoint purposes. The top is a quick description to the user of what the app actually does, followed by an instruction to answer the following 3 questions. Those 3 questions being which region, which crime, and which service. Of note, those 3 questions are very short, brief, to the point, plain language, so anyone who's filling out the app can understand what is going on. Also, it's all fit on one page, so the user's not clicking through 15, 16 pages to get to the information that he or she needs quickly. Lastly, unfortunately, there's an error with our PowerPoint, but it is very easy to read on both a web browser and a mobile browser on the left. Unfortunately, the PowerPoint cut off. And so the user answers those 3 questions, hits the See Final Report button at the bottom, and gets to the results report page. At the top of the results report page is a quick recap for the user of the entries selected on the previous page, just so they know why they're getting the information they are getting, followed by the results table, which contains all and only the service providers that meet those exact criteria in the state of Washington. As Jesse stated earlier, it contains all the key information for those service providers and is very easy to read. At the end of that page is the optional texting function that Jesse also mentioned. Again, 3 very simple questions. You select which provider you would like texted, followed by the cell phone number and cell phone provider. And to note, the cell phone number is not saved anywhere in the application, so there's no concerns about the user's personal identifying information at all being compromised. And so you hit the text report button at the bottom, and in a quick few seconds, you'll receive a text message that looks like this, which contains the service provider's name, service provider's main address, and service provider's telephone number. And the beautiful thing about receiving a text message like this on a smartphone is that you can actually click on the address in the body of the text message. It will open up the Maps application in your phone and drop a pin to exactly where that service provider is located, as well as provide you with detailed directions to that provider. So with that said, we want to thank you for enjoying our presentation, and we hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.
Oh, you might want to keep these. You can answer the questions. Good point. This one's.
Do we just get to
Hi, thanks for your presentation. So I was clicking through, I didn't use my phone, I did it on the computer. So I had a question based on that. So once the user goes through, can they print out, is there a print screen at all to print out the resources, or does it just appear on the phone directly when you get it text to you? Like, can you print out the different service providers that you were referred to?
I can answer that question. We just assumed that the user would be able to hit the print function on whatever browser they're opening it up in and just print it that way.
Okay, I was wondering if it made like a page, because I didn't know if I just couldn't do it because it was in test format, whether it has a page that shows the different agencies that
It would probably
come up.
print the whole final page, the whole results page, the summary of the entries as well as the results table. It wouldn't just print the results table itself.
Okay, and so the example that you showed, they got referred to one provider, but there are different issues. If people check off several different, issues, will they then get multiple service providers?
So in terms of, it's only a one select for the issue because these service providers are quite specialized.
Yeah.
And so we wanted to produce a targeted list at the end. If by chance they do want to find another service provider list, they can easily click the back button, takes another couple of seconds, and find another results table.
Okay.
Can I ask a follow-up question about that? When I used it, my impression was that you could only select one crime and one service at a time, even though some people might be victims of multiple types of crimes and need multiple services. Do you have to do it separately for each crime and each service?
As we were building, we initially planned for possibly a multiple selection because we thought of that issue. However, it was becoming just way too much information, and we didn't want to overload victims with just tons of information, so we decided to streamline the process.
Who would you envision would update the information on the app in terms of keeping up with changes on service providers or adding new service providers?
So we've been working really closely with our organization, and Dana Boatlas, who we've been working with, has reached out to other service providers, and they're thinking of like compiling lists or just trying to keep up with changes. But as it was shown in the presentation, it's very easy to just remove organizations or update or add anything.
And that would be done, that would be done on I was just saying that updating would be done on our end or by the practicum, and it's very simple. So it just going back into the spreadsheet and update.
So the organizations would not have administrative access in order to update their own information?
We figured that it'd be better for us to curate the spreadsheet just because it is a little sensitive to the logic of the app, and we wanted to make sure everything was consistent. But the organization can easily reach out with any new services that they think need to be added.
Thank you.
You mentioned that you consulted with service providers in trying to design the app and find out exactly what they thought was needed. Did you talk to any victims of crime also to find out from them what they could use through the service?
So we actually consulted advocates rather than, well, there are also service providers, but they were primarily the advocates because the app is targeted at helping advocates find services, and given how vulnerable victims can be, our testing was through the advocates who had a better idea of what tools they need to help the victims better.
I've got 3 questions in one. How did you go about identifying the service providers that you include? How did you go about screening them? And how did you test whether or not they're all equal in the services they provide across the particular category that you're putting them in?
So as we were working with the organization, her wonderful administrative assistant actually had to call all these organizations and find the most up-to-date data, like which services are you providing, which crime victims are you targeting in terms of the services you're providing. So that is the most up-to-date list that was developed over the past 2 months.
I've got a final question. My experience in developing apps, technology to try to provide access to justice is that one of the biggest problems is getting people to adopt it. Did you think about how you would get this into the hands of the people you're trying to reach with it?
So our main goal was making this so simple that it really can be used by just advocates on the go. And the organization that we worked with is planning to reach out, because this is a statewide organization, so they're going to flex their influence in reaching out to these other organizations to try to implement this.
Great answer. Thank you.
Our next team is the Florida Interpersonal Violence Help app. It's Deneen Azaula, Natalie Dressy, Bowman Kim, and Donaline Roberts. Come on up.
So they're both good now.
Check, check, check.
Check? Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Bowman Kim, and I'm here with my teammates, Deneen, Natalie, and Donaline. Over the past few months, we've been working very closely together, maybe even a little too closely, amongst ourselves and with the Florida courts to develop the Florida Interpersonal Violence app. I will quickly go over the goals and the functionality of the app. Donaline will then highlight some of the key designs, and Natalie and Deneen will answer any questions you have at the end. So interpersonal violence, what is it? It's when one person has control over the other through coercive behavior such as physical, emotional, sexual, or even economical. It's a serious problem that accounts for almost 15% of all violent crimes today. In fact, an average of 20 people are abused by their intimate partner every minute. This is 10 million a year. So where does our app come in? Currently, there is a gap amongst the legal gap that makes it a challenge for victims to get the legal protections that they need. In fact, it's been reported that 88% of domestic violence litigants are self-represented. This could be for many reasons, including many cannot afford attorneys. Sometimes it's very hard for them to find advocacy. And a lot of times, they don't choose to go to a person and talk about the issues that they've had because it's very personal and private. So even figuring out what kind of injunction they can apply for can be a very complex process. And after that, it's very complicated to even file the forms that range from 9 to 10 pages and are often in legalese that's very hard for a layperson to understand. And finally, there are problems like many victims are unaware that they're even in a problem, or many victims are suffering from trauma that's very hard for them to talk about it. And lastly, many victims are still living with or in a relationship with their abusers that it's very hard for them to physically go out and get help. So a quick overview of our app is that first it determines what kind of injunction and which petition the victim can file. Then it'll fill out and automatically provide the forms for the victims that then instructs and guides the victims on how they can file the petitions in court. So the first step is very simple. It basically asks the victims user-friendly questions that goes through the logic to determine what kind of injunctions they can apply for, from domestic violence, sexual violence, dating violence, repeat violence, and stalking. Once the system recognizes that they are eligible for at least one of the injunctions, they will get only necessary questions instead of filling out the whole form to reduce the completion time. That will automatically populate the petitions that they need to form. Our application currently produces 9 reports, 5 petitions, a confidentiality form, and links to financial aid and child custody. Finally, this is the final report an example that a victim will see. It highlights all of the checklists that they need to do in order to file it in court. This is very important as we wanted to make sure that the full completion process, including they have to print the PDFs, get it signed, and bring it to court. And the checklist will also include all of the forms that they had previously filled out from their previous steps. So all they have to do is print it out. And Donaline.
As Bowman said, I'm Donaline, and I will be talking about the key user needs. We identified 4 factors: safety, security, sensitivity, and simplicity. For each of these, I will explain why they are important and how we came about addressing them. For safety, as some, if not most, of our users will be living with their abusers, we wanted to ensure that we didn't do anything that would jeopardize their safety. As a result, we changed the URL so that it wouldn't scream domestic violence in the search history, but instead it would be known only to the users. At the top and bottom of each page, we have a warning banner that will alert the victim that if they are in danger, that they should be calling the 911. We have an escape button that once you click it, it will take you to Google. We were very careful to go to a blank website that wouldn't have targeted ads popping up about domestic violence. Because privacy is a very big concern, we made sure to not have a login feature so that no information would be saved. We recognize that the forms are extremely long, so we decided to focus on shorter questions, simpler ones, and ensure that the information is only limited to necessary things. As a result, we ensured that we ordered the app so that you will only ask what type of injunction you would qualify for, so you can still get assistance without having to answer personally identifiable information like name, address, and phone number, which are only needed to fill out the forms. For simplicity, we recognize that we want to cater to people of different reading levels and backgrounds, so we used an app called Write Clearly to ensure that we avoid as much legal language as possible. And we did user testing with our non-lawyer friends as well as a conference of Florida domestic violence coordinators. In addition, we recognize that these victims will still be going to court and still have to hear legal jargon, so we kept the unavoidable legal words, but we had a pop-up that will explain in layman's terms what the words meant. No one really likes to fill out long forms, so we made sure that there was like a visual progress bar that will ensure that people keep motivated to fill out the app. Recognizing that the Florida Supreme Court is a government entity and they wanted us to consider the visually impaired, we decided to have a text banner that goes throughout the entire app to notify the visually impaired. For colors, we wanted to be accessible to all the gender spectrum, as well as be professional. So fortunately, this is the colors of the Florida Supreme Court website, as well as Florida Gators. So for our client is the Florida Supreme Court, but there are 86,735 injunctions in 2015 to 2016 for the 67 counties. So because of that, we expect that will increase because we are deploying it to 42 domestic violence shelters. Thank you.
Judge? Sure, the judge has questions. Come on down.
I have a question like one that I asked to the last team. The approach seems to assume that only one form of injunction is applicable, but when I look at each of the categories, they seem to me to overlap, that you could be a victim of repeat violence as well as a victim of domestic violence as well as a victim of sexual violence. How do you deal with that?
So that's true. Some of them do overlap, but they go in order of a decision tree. So the way that it works is that if you have a kid with the other person, or if you live with the other person as a family member, then you can apply for domestic violence. But if that's not true, then you ask the sexual violence questions. And if that's not true, then it goes on to dating, repeat, and then at the very last step, it will be stalking. But it is true that they do overlap according to violence.
But just to add to that, we did talk to the Florida courts about it. And basically, when one person, we did it in the order of, I guess, priority and more protection that a person gets. So if a victim applies for domestic violence, usually they're protected more than the amount of they would be under repeat violence. So we've consulted with the Florida courts, and they thought this was the right way to go, too.
What is the law on this? Are you able to apply for multiple types of injunctions simultaneously?
I guess you could, but it's not necessary, and it doesn't happen practically in what they have occurred.
Thank you.
Did the courts or anyone raise the concern of providing legal advice by directing the individual to one particular type of application?
So we made sure to give a disclaimer that it's not legal advice. We're just guiding them towards it. I don't think that that was something that, would be an issue with the app because we're only guiding them to the petitions.
And also, I guess, without the app, that's the kind of thought process that they would have to do alone anyway. The court currently has a brochure that lays out the different factors for the 5 injunctions, but I guess this does a closer job and hopefully a better job of guiding them to the right injunction.
So I guess I'll ask a similar question that I asked the last team about sort of your design approach and how user-centered it was. And you mentioned that you talked to some non-lawyers and some non-violence coordinators. What else did you do? Or did you talk to people who've been victims of interpersonal violence?
So we didn't seek out interpersonal violence victim because it is such a sensitive area. But we, as you mentioned, we did test it with the people that work closely with the victims. And also we have some friends that have been in similar situations that we did testing with.
And I liked the escape button. As I was going through, I thought, oh, this is a great idea. And so I clicked it, and so I could escape. And it took me back to a plain Google screen. And I was wondering, if I pushed the go forward, and it shot me back to this. So I was wondering, is there a way for you to make it so that once you escape, you couldn't go back to this page? Do you know? So if someone came and said, oh, what have you been doing? And they click your go back button, then they actually land on this page. So is there a way to design that out?
We realize that is an issue, and it also depends on the browser that you're using. Right now, it will take you back, and we're trying to figure that out. But hopefully, because we have the URL that's ambiguous, it won't be too much of an issue.
Well, I guess in addition to that, we wanted to make the distinction that when a person didn't want to go back, they could exit it out of the app completely. The reason for the escape is so that they didn't have to actually start over the app, so that they could possibly go back and not spend a lot of time.
Yeah.
Yeah, due to the nature that's on the internet, there are just some things that are outside of our control, unfortunately. But our most basic safety functions ensure that, or reduces the risk that an abuser would see something on the app, just reduces the risk of an obvious visit to the app.
Sure.
You mentioned, go ahead.
Sorry, no, going through the app, once I got to printing out or the form at the end, for the name, for example, I did notice I was able to, the case caption actually had the information, while some of the blanks in the actual form did not reflect the information. Is that due to the browser that I was using, or are you still in the process of completing that?
So if a person were not to use our app, unfortunately, it would take about an hour or so to complete the entire form. And we recognize that we talked to our client, the court, and we discussed that because of our safety functions and the fact that if they came back to the site, their information would be deleted or saved, and they would spend an hour and they would just get frustrated that that none of their information was filled out, that we asked them if we could just include the most necessary questions. And we believe that we're comfortable with that because it only would take about 20 to 30 minutes to complete the app. And we believe that serves both the safety and convenience of the user.
So what would be the experience of the user once they have completed this? They will print it, and then what?
So yes, our last report has our checklist, and it goes through all the steps that they would go to in order to bring their forms to the court and then file and then petition to a judge.
So I think going off from your question, what you're asking is the filled out portion would be enough to be filed in court, and we've checked that with the Florida courts.
Thank you.
Minutes went by fast.
Our next team is a team that built two apps connected with each other. It's the Alaska Guardian and Conservatorship Annual Report app and the Alaska Guardian and Conservatorship Report Expense Tracker. And it's Fairway Dempster, Rachel Johns, Jody Carroll, and Sydney Reed. Come on up. Clicker, microphone.
Oh, I did. I just got to step in it, yeah.
Good afternoon. My name is Rachel. This is Sydney, Jody, and Fairway. And our project is the Alaska Guardian and Conservatorship Annual Report app. Our app is a tool to help legal guardians keep track of the money spent for the person in the guardianship, as well as easily fill out the required annual report form to submit to the court. When we first talked to our content experts from the Alaska court system in Anchorage, Alaska, they presented us with a large, outdated PDF document that needed to be submitted to the court annually. There were a number of problems with the reporting process. For one thing, the geographical isolation of Alaska results in a number of rural areas that make it difficult for residents to access the system. Furthermore, as a result of the process, there were a number of areas where there were errors in the reports submitted. In 2017, one of our content experts reviewed 1,490 reports submitted by the Guardians. Almost 30% were deficient and almost 10% were approved, but with educational notes added. 54 needed to be further reviewed by a judge before the reports could be fully approved. Also, out of the 920 reports approved, only 272 of them were family guardians, that is, lay people responsible for filling out this complicated paperwork. All of the cases with education and deficiencies sent were from family guardians. This shows the struggle that family guardians in particular had with the reporting process. Our content experts were also concerned guardians were not accurately keeping track of expenses in the court system. The court is very busy with the program, as it was responsible for over $93 million in assets in Anchorage alone. Therefore, a change to the process was drastically needed.
So this is the 13-page form digitized. We have a long form warning because we don't currently have a save function for data privacy reasons. So we want our users to have everything ready to go before they start. When you get into the questions, the form is responsive. So on this question about decision-making authority, if the guardian says they have medical decision-making authority, the next question that they'll see are the medical care questions, whereas if they were to say they only have housing decision-making authority and not medical care, the next question that they'll see is the housing question, and they'll never see the medical care questions. We use pop-up text throughout the app to explain questions that people tend to have difficulty answering and to give them more guidance on how to answer the questions. On this next question about power of attorney, we actually reference an Alaska law that we link to right in the question, so our users can get right to the law, read it, go back to the app, and continue on with the questions. When you finish the form, you get an output like this. You get the PDF already filled out for you. You just print that, submit it to the court. You also get that PDF emailed to you. We have contact information in case you have any questions, and you have a record of your question and answers right on that page, and you can change them from that page. If you say you have financial decision-making authority, you get to a page like this. This question's asking about the person in the guardianship's annual income. So if you put in the income amounts for the person, and you tell the app what their income was last year, the app will just total it up for you. You don't have to do any math. It'll explain how the formula works, and then you'll move on. Excuse me. This is a particularly important feature on the expenses questions, which my colleague Jody will talk to you about now.
So the expense tracker is a companion application to the main app. It allows users to easily keep track of their expenses, categorize them, and upload any documentation, as well as take pictures of receipts. We've provided a desktop version as well as a mobile version to optimize the user experience. The desktop version allows you to enter multiple expenses at the same time. On this page, I selected 3 before, so it pops up with 3. You can enter the expense information, the date the expense was incurred, and then a brief note about it. If you notice here, I used utilities twice. You can actually select the same category twice in case you have multiple bills or receipts for the same category. If you hit enter expense information, it tallies up automatically. And then here, I'm just uploading the documentation from my hard drive. When you click next, it will ask you if you want an expense report, and then it will prompt you for the reporting period. After that, it will give you a report with the expenses you just entered, the receipts, as well as the accumulated expenses that you've entered for using the app over the reporting period. This is just a PDF version of that is actually emailed to the user as well. Next, with the mobile app is designed for on-the-go use. Has a little bit different format. So if you see here, you can only enter 1 expense per page, but it does give you a version to add another expense. So just hit that right there. But then here, I'm just Xing that out with the red X because I decided I didn't want to enter another expense at this time. The next part, with this, when you're entering it on the mobile app, when you want to upload documentation, and when you select choose file, it prompts you to take a picture of the receipt right then and there. So you don't actually have to upload anything from your hard drive. This is really great for on-the-go use when you have a receipt that you don't want to save and that you're likely going to lose or throw away. And so our content experts really stressed that point, that this is what they were looking for. Next, I just want to talk about how the expenses tracker feeds into the annual app. So they're actually connected through a shared database. So I don't know if anyone looked at the numbers after they did the expense tracker and then pulled it up for the annual form. So the annual form actually pulls data from the expense tracker. So when you enter in your case number and your reporting period, the annual form will automatically upload that information into the annual expense page. And you can just see here that the numbers matched. Next, Fei Wei will talk about future directions that we see this app going in.
Thank you, Jody. So as far as future aspirations, for our expense tracker, with the help of optimal character recognition, we hope that our expense tracker will eventually be able to capture the picture of a receipt and be able to auto-populate that information into the tracker for future data usage. We also expect more states to be using these apps. These apps, that functionality can be adapted to many states, and we hope to see more states using it. We'd also like to see higher usage in rural areas with the advent of the mobile app and with the option to be able to send the form to courts using the online system.
Thank you, Fei Wei. We believe our app will simplify the process for guardians and conservators. With the help of Neota Logic, Georgetown Law, and our content experts from the Elastic Court, this app will help every step along the way. Thank you very much.
Sure.
I have a question about the expense tracker.
Sure.
It reminded me of doing my taxes, which I did recently, and I used TurboTax. The biggest problem in doing taxes, I find, is assembling the information that you need to enter. Did you think about how to help people get the information together? Have you thought about text reminders or something that might help them assemble the information that they should be entering contemporaneously with the incurrence of the expenses so that they don't at the end of the year find this problem of pulling everything together that they need to complete the report?
For that, we're really relying on our content experts to kind of work with the guardians to make sure that they know that this app is available. This is one of the things that they've gotten feedback from, that they just don't keep track of expenses because they lose receipts or they don't know what to keep track of. So they're really going to go out to the gardens and promote this mobile app to be able to do that. But a text reminder is a great thing to just, maybe like once a month or like a calendar reminder. It's something we can certainly talk to our content experts about.
In terms of the language throughout the app, it was very thorough, very complete. But sometimes, as Jim just mentioned, I felt like I was filling out my taxes.
Yeah.
The word dividends, the word trust, primary beneficiary, there were some pop-ups, but is there any other way that that the individuals can get some of the information more broken down for them if they need to, so that when they start working on the app, they don't feel that it is so complicated?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do use pop-up text. These were all the questions were vetted by our content experts, so they approved the language, and they've been working on this for years, so they know what trouble areas users have. But we also provide contact information at various different points throughout the app. If someone has a question, they can just call or email and hopefully get a response pretty quickly.
That one poor person, I saw it was just the one name, contact Lisa W. If you get out that, contact.
They gave us her contact info for now. I'm sure when they roll this out on a larger scale, they'll have more people. We can add that information later.
I saw that, I thought, oh my gosh, she has to take all the calls.
Lisa has a lot to
Yeah, she's very busy.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask you, how long does it, I did appreciate that you said, gather all your documents before you get started, because it's going to be like a long slog, it seemed like, which it did feel like a long slog to go through everything. So how long do you expect it takes folks to complete it? And are there alternatives? Like, what would, if they didn't have this app, would they just have a paper form and they would just fill it out?
Yeah, so the alternative is a big, long PDF form. We got about 13 pages of an outdated PDF, which I actually went through and updated because they gave us new language, new questions and everything. So we actually changed the PDF. But one of the things that we do hope to implement, though, is a save function so that they're actually able to save that. Right now, for privacy reasons, we weren't able to do that on the fly, but eventually they kind of want to move towards like an e-filing system, like a FAFSA or something like that. So that's something that we're looking forward to implement. And then that kind of breaks it up so that you can actually save your information, go back if you don't have anything. But I think that when I user tested it with my mom, who actually is a guardian, and she said it took about an hour to 2 hours to go through it. So it is quite a long slog to go through it.
Yeah, because I was curious about whether or not, I was thinking if I had just a stack of papers and I could, check it, I could, fill it in as I wanted to and then go do something else and then come back, like, would the app be faster or better for me if I couldn't save it and go away and come back? Because it did feel like there was so much, it's pretty dense and there's a lot of reporting that's involved. So I wasn't sure if the app was really saving, saving time or energy or money,
Yeah, I mean, the one thing they could do is they could have the PDF on the side so they know what questions are going to be asked. But a lot of times, what we tried to do with the app is limit the questions they saw. So sometimes they don't have financial information. So if they don't have financial information for the app, if they're not the conservator, the amount of information that they're asked to put into the app drastically reduces. The financial section is a large portion of that. So if they're not the conservator for the guardian or for the person in guardianship, then they don't have to fill any of that out. And so that was a problem when they were getting that 13-page form. They would, guardians would think they would have to fill that out, and they actually didn't have to fill that portion out.
And another question is, how many guardians are there? Like, what's the market for this? So you said that there was a review of 1,490 reports.
Yeah.
But how many, in a given year do they get?
That I believe was for Anchorage alone.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so there's a mix of family guardians and then public and private guardians. So family guardians are more lay people. So yeah, there were up to 1,490 applications, and only a small percentage of them that actually were approved were family guardians. So this really helps with the process for them.
For the total for the state, I don't think we got that information, but we did get the information for Anchorage because that's who our content expert was mostly directly linked, was the Anchorage area. So we got which I believe it was like 90 million in assets that they were responsible for.
Oh, so now, that was 3 teams. We are taking a break for 15 minutes. We're going to reassemble at 1:15 exactly. I forgot to mention earlier, we will have food, not now, but at 4 o'clock, and beer and wine, which is important to some of us in this room. But anyway, we're taking a break now, and see you back here at 1:15.
Roughness.
Oh, yeah.
Near the computer. I just go 1 through 5 on each of the categories. At least 2 guys put every circle by
We have, yes.
Use the same amount? Oh, Lord. Little did I know. That's what actually I've been doing, so. I guess I just transferred my scores.
The last time we emailed, you asked me about Just Fix.
Yes.
You wanted to talk, and I never heard back.
Yeah, I've talked to them. Yeah, I think I had been having
Well,
conversations
we're
with
doing
them
a
about.
TIG grant to
Yes.
try to expand on what they're doing with
Yes.
Just Fix. I think they've got a decent model to use for other areas of
Yes.
self-help. So.
Yeah, and that's what we've been talking to them about. I've had more conversations with them about, usability, and I know there are other markets that would like to have them be active there, but I know also that their model is one of really becoming part of the housing advocacy community and part of the ecosystem, and it seems like it's not as easy to, they want to be more than just, here's an app and you want to become more part of the, it seems like the fabric, the place where they're all the other actors.
Well, even the fact
So,
that
yeah,
we can
yeah.
still take that model.
Yes.
But I didn't know if you were still interested in talking about that.
Yeah, so we, maybe we should still talk, because I'm curious to get your expert opinion on it, because I gave them a small grant this year. Yeah, the 17, 17. I know they're trying to figure out whether or not,
Yeah, and I'd love to take it into the different areas to see, because that's one of the things that always comes up is people get in court and they're not prepared. They don't have the right material.
Yeah. I know that, okay, let's, I'll follow up with you.
I just wanted to remind you.
Yes, okay, thanks.
So I was texting with Alaska to get the answers to your question. I was texting with Alaska.
Don't give me outside information.
Well, you wanted to know the market. You wanted to know the market. So
I can't have any outside information.
it only goes up to
I'm working within what I'm
5,500. Well, that doesn't really relate to that. You were asking, that's all I'm giving it, yeah. Well, that's just Alaska. So it's like 5,500 cases. Well, actually, what it is it's really driving from the court because they had a huge guardianship debate article many years ago because most of the guardians are not professional guardians, they're individuals, and all the sort of problems with the assets, so they just needed the court to standardize. So anyhow, sorry. Look at you, you're being so diligent. You've got all your, so I'll stop interrupting you. I want you to think, this is Eduardo. Eduardo, this is Erica. Remember him when I refer to him. He's our legal tech fellow. Okay, all right. Hi, Jim.
How are you, Kat?
Good, how are you doing?
Good, thank you. Good to see you.
That's dedicated. So, thank you so much. Good to see you. No, we were asking even for you were the last one to work that. We got you. So we figured it out by talking about that.
That's how it was going on. You look like it was I see you.
Other than like getting the itself or actual like doing the question.
Peeps, we are going to reassemble. We're going to reassemble, and here are our last three teams. Important public announcement. Shortly, there are going to be soft drinks and water in the back of the room, so if you want to grab something, feel free to do it. But I don't know what time it's going to be here, but just if you're dying of thirst, keep one eye on what's going on back there. Okay, so our next team is the SNAP and TANF Assistant of New Mexico, Maheen Aminian, Molly Hasten, Ryan Suska, and Emily Wells. Come on up. All right, let me find stuff. You need a microphone right there. Sorry.
Testing.
Yeah, this is on the bottom. Testing. I think, oh yeah, it's working. Okay. Great. Do we have to? Perfect. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Maheen, and these are my partners, Emily, Ryan, and Molly. And today we'd like you to meet Stan, the SNAP and TANF Assistant of New Mexico, which is an application that we developed for Law Access New Mexico. And the question that we pose to the users of this application is, do you or your children qualify for public benefits in New Mexico? So here's an overview of what we are going to speak to you about today. First, I'm going to tell you about who our client is and what the problem is. Then I will get into what the application is and its purpose. We'll then talk about how Stan solves the problem and what it brings to the table. From there, we'll talk about Stan's plain language approach and why it makes the app effective. And then finally, we'll talk about looking forward, where we hope our app will go, and we will answer any questions that you may have. So who is our client? Our client is Law Access New Mexico, which is a free legal advice telephone service for low-income residents of New Mexico. And they provide initial intake services and counsel. The problem that our client faces is that New Mexico has a significant population of non-parent caregivers. And right now, actually, New Mexico ranks as one of the top 5 households of children living in poverty. Just this year in 2018, a study revealed that about 1/3 of the children living in New Mexico are in poverty. And that's about 31% of the state's child population versus the 22% national average. Non-legal basic services that these families almost always need are public benefits for the children, and these include support for things such as housing, utilities, and clothing. The availability for these benefits and eligibility are widely unknown, and many of these families do not have these services because they don't know how to apply. So this is where our application Stan comes in. And the purpose of Stan is to advise users on their likelihood of eligibility for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, otherwise known as SNAP. And SNAP is the food stamps program that New Mexico offers. Stan also provides the likelihood of eligibility for the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families Cash Assistance Program, otherwise known as TANF, and TANF provides monetary support for basic needs such as utilities, housing, and clothing. Stan walks users through the New Mexico application. The Human Services Department offers that for benefits, and that's the application that all people in the state have to fill out in order to qualify for these public benefit programs. Stan educates and provides users with information to assist with the application process. And in doing so, Stan seeks to reduce the poverty level. So how does Stan solve the problem?
Well, when a user goes on the online application, the user could choose one of three paths. The first path is to gain information on the SNAP program, the TANF program, and other benefit programs that New Mexico offers. The second path is to check eligibility for both SNAP and TANF. If the user chooses this option, then he or she will have to answer a series of 5 to 10 questions based on age, income, citizenship, and residency. And then from there, the user will receive a eligibility report emailed to the person and instructions for what the next steps may be. The third user path is to apply for benefits. If the user is ready in that moment to apply for benefits, then he or she just needs to fill out a series of 10 to 25 questions. And then at the very end, the user will receive a completed PDF file that he or she just needs to print and bring to the New Mexico Human Services Department to file. And you could see here on the right of the screen, we have a screenshot of what those three options look like when the user accesses the website.
So understanding that users have unique situations, Stan tries to guide and direct early on by presenting a disclaimer for certain circumstances. An example of this is if immigration status is a personal concern, the application lets you know early on that there are resources available for you to reach out to. Additionally, once you've completed the application, you'll go ahead and bring it to the New Mexico Human Services Department, as Maheen mentioned. From there, they'll process your application and you'll be assigned a caseworker. What Law Access New Mexico does is inform their clients step by step of how to document this process as it continues, as well as the materials to bring when they do so. So what Stan presents is a downloadable application report that you can bring that also has this information, and that presents ease and control to the user throughout the rest of the process.
Which way does it go? All right. So, so we had one of the main things that we were going to focus on when we were designing Stan was privacy. So we decided not to ask any sensitive information. We don't ask for social security numbers or citizen or immigration status. We really felt that a lot of the users might have concerns about putting this information into any kind of online portal, so we just decided to keep it out altogether. In addition, Stan doesn't ask for any, Stan doesn't save any of the user's data. So to tell you guys a little bit about how complex the New Mexico application is that we implemented into Stan, here's a screenshot of, an example of some of the text that can be found on the application. Molly here has the entire application. It consists of 28 pages total. So it's a pretty extensive application. And all of the highlighted text are words that New Mexico residents, due to some of their lower literacy rates, are really not going to be able to understand. Here you can see the organization of the paper app. It's pretty confusing. There's a lot of different colors. There are arrows, there are text boxes, there are check boxes. There's just a lot going on there. And here's an example of the same section in Stan. Stan puts less text on each page. Stan only asks questions that need to be asked. So here the user indicated that they own a home. So Stan asked if they paid a mortgage, but didn't ask questions like, are you homeless or do you pay rent? Here again, you can kind of see the disorganization of the paper application. Note that this section 15 asks the user to flip all the way back to section 3 in order to be able to answer these questions. And again, Stan just puts less text on the page, more organization, and just makes it much easier for the reader to follow. If there is language that really can't be turned into plain language text, Stan will provide an easy to understand pop-up explanation. And because we are trying to cater not only to adults, we're also trying to cater to children, Stan will adapt the text depending on whether the user indicates if they're applying on behalf of a child or if they're applying for themselves.
And with an eye to the future, we hope to collaborate with the New Mexico Human Services Department so that eventually the application can be directly submitted electronically and there's no need to print it and take it in or fax it in. We also hope to expand and be able to help more people and provide additional programs such as Medicaid, Medicare, and the Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program, and also make Stan available in multiple languages.
overall, it's been very rewarding for us to work on this application, and we look forward to its positive results.
So thank you so much for all of your time, and at this point, we are happy to answer any questions.
I don't think it. Hi. So you talked about how you didn't want to include, and we've heard this from the other groups too, the more sensitive information like social security numbers or citizenship issues. So once the form is printed out, then you would just fill that in on your own?
Yes,
People
the
could-
citizenship information can be filled out on their own. There's actually very little information required to submit the app. So they can just, even if they don't fill it out completely, can just submit it to the office and proceed from there.
SNAP and TANF are federal programs. At least the first two parts of the app, the information and eligibility, would they have national applicability? Could that be replicated in other states? I understand that the third part, the actual application, is a New Mexico specific application. But why wouldn't the first two parts be something that every state could adopt?
We would love to see it be adopted that way.
Think big.
Yeah.
I have another question. It's the same question I always ask. How are you going to get this into the hands of users?
Yeah, so we're working with Legal Access New Mexico. They want this app to reduce the strain on their current staff members answering these questions. So we're hoping that when people come to them with these questions and these concerns, they can refer them to the app. And then working with other legal aid groups that they know of, we can start getting this out to people who have non-biological children in their custody.
There was a question about needing language assistance.
Yes.
If the person answers that question in the affirmative, what do you expect to happen?
We're hoping to direct them to groups that can assist them with that. Legal Access New Mexico does have assistance in other languages. Eventually, this app will be in Spanish, if not others, and so we hope to enable them to use it in whatever native language they need.
I was just getting. No, I was curious. It looked. I actually like the look of this.
Oh yeah.
It was great.
Yeah. I'm doing two microphones here, sorry. Next up is the Equal Justice Wyoming Eligibility Advisor. It's Sam Bolin, Christopher Ibrahim, Valerie Cantave, and Jordan Thompson. They both work. Oh, you need the clicker. It should be here. Yes. Ah, thank you.
Perfect. Does Next just bring up mine? When do we go? Ready? Hey everybody, I'm Sam.
My name is Chris Ibrahim.
My name is Valerie Kantav.
And I'm Jordan Thompson.
And we worked with Equal Justice Wyoming on the Equal Justice Wyoming Eligibility Advisor. So just a quick agenda. I'm going to go through the client and the users, Equal Justice Wyoming, and the Wyomingans that we hope to use our app. Chris is going to go through the design goals and the kind of challenges that we had that were specific to our app. And then Valerie and Jordan are going to run through a quick demo. So our client is Equal Justice Wyoming, which is a state Supreme Court funded program in Wyoming that's trying to build a network of resources to increase access to justice for low-income Wyomingans. It's not a direct services organization, but it connects a lot of low-income people with the direct services organizations throughout the state. The users that we hope to reach with our app are people up to 200% and up to 300% of the federal poverty guideline, either residents of Wyoming or people with legal issues in Wyoming. Up to 200% because that is the threshold for qualifying for a lot of the free legal services in Wyoming, like Legal Aid of Wyoming being the biggest, but there are others. And up to 300% of the federal poverty guidelines, and people are eligible for the Wyoming State Bar Modest Means Program, which is similar to the DC Affordable Law Firm in that it provides reduced costs but not free attorneys to people that are at that income level. The legal problems are, unlike all the other apps, our legal problems are myriad. It's, you know, a variety of civil legal issues. These are just some of the many resources that people in Wyoming have, and the main goal of our app is to get people to the specific organization that they need to be getting to, rather than having to just kind of guess and go out in the myriad of organizations. So, can I hand it off to Chris?
So in talking to our the parent organization that we're working with and deciding what we wanted the app to do, we ran into 4 distinct challenges that we needed to address in making the app. The first being engagement, because Wyoming is has the second lowest population density in the United States. It actually has less people than Washington, D.C., with a obviously much greater surface area. So connecting the people spread throughout the entire state to sort of centralized resources was going to be a challenge. Second was the simplicity of the app. Our contact with Equal Justice, Aaron, really stressed that he wanted only 3 or 4 questions to be asked so they can be quickly put in the information and get the information that they need. Third being efficiency. It sort of goes hand in hand with simplicity. We wanted them to put in the minimum number of inputs, the least amount of information that they could, and get the most output, so the most references to organizations that we could give them. And finally, as with almost every one of these apps, privacy is a concern. We wanted to make sure that users wouldn't be concerned that their personal information would be given out or email be used for spam or any sort of issues like that. So in addressing these issues, these are the 4 goals and also themes of our app. So to address the simplicity goal, we really wanted to make sure every question was short and had plain language, explanations for all terms that could possibly be confusing to the user. And as Jordan and Val will show you, the app really is very direct with how we ask the questions. The second issue was engagement, where we actually embedded maps into the final report, and again, Jordan will show you guys that later. But the maps you can actually click on, and they'll give you directions from wherever you live to each organization. Third was privacy. We give optional options, I guess, for like email or download for the report, so they could receive it to their own personal computers, or they could opt not to. And last was efficiency. We really had a very, very limited number of questions, and we tried to, the report can be quite lengthy if you put in 1 or 2 or 3 different legal issues. It can direct you to a great number of reference organizations. So we really tried to address all these issues. And now I'm going to hand it over to Val to start going through the demo of the app itself.
Thanks, Chris. So as you can see, we decided to keep the theme of our app somewhat consistent with the theme and logo of Equal Justice Wyoming's website. Currently, they're just a tad bit different, but Equal Justice Wyoming has informed us that they will be changing their theme to match the theme of our app, which you can see in the top left. So on the welcome screen, it gives the user an idea of what exactly the app will be asking and the purpose of the app. And most importantly, the welcome screen includes a disclaimer that, you know, by using the app, you're not engaging in an attorney-client relationship with any party. And the user must click that they understand and accept before moving on. So the first screening questions ask whether or not the user is a resident of Wyoming and whether their legal issue has arose in Wyoming. Then the app proceeds into some more specific questions requiring their input, such as household size, income, and zip code. So each of these questions have pop-up text nearby with more explanation as to what exactly the questions are asking in more layman's terms. And if we'll let it go a little bit, but if the input values are improper, in terms of like the app's eligibility, it will notify the user and prompt the user to correct these issues. So that's what's going on right now. And on the last page of questions, it asks the user to identify their legal issue or legal issues. So again, each of these legal issues have pop-up text that the user can access just by scrolling over the words. And they further explain the legal issues so that the user can understand them in more layman's terms. And when the user clicks certain of the legal issues, then follow-up questions will be prompted so that the app can more specifically identify and direct the user to the specific legal service providers. So now I'm going to toss it over to Jordan, who's going to talk about the report.
Thanks, Val. So once the user enters their information, the app creates a report that is available via email, or it can be downloaded in a Word document or PDF format. So as you can see, the video is starting to play now. But the main idea behind the report, as Chris stated earlier, was to maximize the output while keeping with a limited amount of information that we requested from users. So we focused on efficiency, basically making sure we had no excess information and making the app useful. So as you can see, we've done more than just providing a basic address. There's a Google Maps link that will actually allow users to automatically be directed to the nearest legal service provider. And again, hinting to what Chris stated earlier, Wyoming's such a huge state. You can see from the example, that's a 5-hour commute. But what our app does do is direct users to less obvious choices that may be a little closer than the more obvious resources. So as you can see in this example, the user entered that their legal issues were related to domestic issues, more specifically child custody and tax issues, and the report is directing them to over 6 organizations that may be able to help them with these services. Another thing to remember about the report that's also useful for people who may not be deemed eligible based on their income, but still require some sort of legal help, the app directs them to the Wyoming Bar and other self-help resources, so they're just not left out in the cold. But basically the idea behind the report was to be as efficient as possible and to be as useful. So this kind of covers a overview of the report and thus our app, and we'd be happy to answer any questions. And thank you to everybody who helped make this possible.
So I wanted to find out from you all if you tested your app with folks who qualify for legal aid, or whether you just talked to the Equal Justice Wyoming folks about, what kinds of things should be included in the app.
Yeah, so we didn't reach out to anybody specifically that does qualify for income-based legal services in Wyoming, but we did reach out to friends and family of ours who, are not lawyers and do not have the kind of vocabulary that a lawyer would have to make sure it was as plain language as possible and as readable as possible. And we also had Equal Justice Wyoming go over the app to make sure that it, was what they were looking for, and they were really pleased with it. So.
On your list of legal issues, can you mouse over them to get a definition of what the issue is? I'm thinking specifically of a term like consumer or consumer law, whatever it is. Some people might think that has to do with eating and not like debt issues.
Yeah, so each one of our legal issues, aside from the ones that kick you out of the app, criminal and claims against Wyoming state employees, have pop-up text that explain exactly what the legal issue means. So we've put them in as plain language terms as possible, and each one is defined.
So, but how did you choose those issues in the first place? Why did you use them at all instead of going directly to a plain language definition of what you were trying to get at?
These were the terms used on the Equal Justice website that the user can actually go to direct to even more forms and things like that. So we were hoping that they would be able to connect the terms that they could read the definition on our website back to the Equal Justice website, and also there would be terms that they would see on any legal resources they'd have to use.
What determines the hierarchy of the results that you get in the report?
So the most important I mean, the top one that it will give to you is whether or not you qualify for income-based legal aid. And so typically, if you do, Legal Aid of Wyoming will be the first result that you will get. And then lowered in the report, just because it's kind of less significant of a legal resources, is the legal advice clinics that Equal Justice Wyoming does monthly across the state.
And if you're asking about like the actual issues themselves, it's just in the same order as the actual list earlier in the website. They come up in the same order. So if they put like domestic relations and then tax, domestic relations would come up first, and then tax would be underneath that. That's just the way the way we designed it. Yeah.
How about physical proximity? Is that a factor?
It wasn't a factor actually when we were creating the report, but that's a pretty good suggestion we can implement later. We didn't consider that.
It might be that everything in Wyoming is
6
far.
hours,
Yeah.
6 hours away.
That is also the case.
And who would upkeep the information on this application?
So I think one of Professor Rostain's wonderful TAs takes care of some of the updating, but keeping it in contact with Equal Justice Wyoming to make sure we have the kind of up-to-date information and that the legal service providers all still exist and are still providing legal service. I don't even know if this is on. Sorry. Oh, it is. Okay.
And what currently exists for Equal Justice Wyoming? If do folks just call into them, or do they have on their website? Do they already have something where you can click and figure out whether or not you're eligible, or are you just sort of like 2.0ing it, or is it doesn't exist at all?
They have intake forms, but I believe you have to actually call them and contact them and have a conversation with someone to get the form and then resend the form in to see if you're eligible, whereas this would tell you right off the bat whether you're eligible for the services.
In addition, on the website, they have self-help resources, and they are a little bit more lengthy than our app. And so I think our app kind of just streamlines the process and makes sure that the user can get an idea of all the legal issues that they could potentially seek help for without having to click through multiple screens and multiple pages on the website.
How are you going to get this in the hands of users? I keep asking that question because among the most common reasons why people don't get help with civil legal problems is they don't self-identify their problem as legal, or even if they do, they don't know where to go to get help. So how are we going to this is something that's intended to be used not by a legal services organization, but by the person who has a problem. How are they going to know about it?
So we are planning on working with Equal Justice Wyoming to see what resources they currently use to reach out to people. I know that they're planning on putting this on their website, which they said gets a pretty high amount of traffic, so people can be able to click on it without having to navigate too much. It'll be pretty readily available. We're hoping that they'll also contact the organizations that they work with to have it more marketed to the people that they know, and hopefully just spread through those sort of avenues. Yeah.
Well done. Take this. Okay, and we have our sixth team, which is the New Orleans release date calculator. Summer Danzason, Coimbra Jackson, Luck Nguyen, Robert Van Someren Grieve. Here are some microphones. The clicker should be up there.
Okay. Can you guys hear me? Yeah. All right. My name is Coimbra, and I am here with my team, who consists of Rob, Summer, and Luck. And we worked with the New Orleans Public Defender's Office in order to create the New Orleans Release Date Calculator. Just to give you an overview of what we're going to talk about, I'm going to begin by kind of giving you a backstory. Rob is then going to go into the functionality of our app, and Summer is going to discuss our users and our user research, while Luck is going to end with discussing reentry resources. I don't think anyone in this room is ignorant to the incarceration rates that we currently have. In the United States, we are above any other developed country in the world, and Louisiana is not actually has the highest incarceration rate in the United States. Last year, they were reported to having 35,000 inmates. Within incarceration issues, we have overdetention, and overdetention is exactly what it sounds like. It's when someone is detained past their sentencing date. The reason that overdetention is present is because of lack of informed advocates as well as archaic logging systems. We also have overworked public defenders due to a high caseload, very little time that they can dedicate to each case. And that has to do with the lack of adequate resources that the advocates can use. So Luck is now going to go into how our app helps with that.
Rob is.
I'm sorry, Rob, my apologies.
So the app does several things, and one of the main things it hopes to do is help public defenders give better advice to their clients quickly and correctly. So public defenders, when working with their clients, typically are confronted with a plea deal that's on the table. The overwhelming majority of criminal charges ends in a plea deal, and the main question that clients will have is, when do I get out? And this is actually a difficult question to answer for many reasons, not just because lawyers are math challenged, but also because it's actually surprisingly hard to figure out under Louisiana law whether or not someone will be eligible, and if so, when for an early release. Now, there's three main factors that determine eligibility. One is the current charge, the other is whether someone's sentence is an habitual offender, and the third is their criminal history. So what the app does is ask you to enter this information and enter the sentence. And what it does is classify both the current charge and the criminal history, because what matters is whether or not it's a sex offense or a crime of violence, both or neither. And it does not just set eligibility and tell you whether or not the client will be eligible. It'll actually calculate what those release dates will be. Now, to do that, it needs a little more information than just the charge and the criminal history. It will also ask the client, the attorney, to enter the client's pretrial detention periods. And by adding all that up, it will ultimately give an accurate calculation of a good time release date, a parole eligibility date, and the last possible release date. And in this way, they can tell their client straight up, once they've entered this, you're likely to get out at this date, provided you don't get into a fight, and so on and so forth. So by doing this, it gives public defenders a tool to correctly and quickly advise their clients on when they will get out, which again will allow them clients to make up their mind whether or not to accept the plea deal that's in front of them. Now, it doesn't just do this. It actually also gives the user the opportunity to save the information into a database. And by doing that, it will give the Public Defender's Office access to a spreadsheet that contains information about their clients' possible release dates, allowing them both to keep track of when people are supposed to get out, but also to measure the problem of overdetention and possibly to direct resources towards remedying it.
Okay, so our application provides a second track for the family members of incarcerated individuals. Now, recognizing that the sophistication level of the average family member user is quite different in terms of their familiarity with legal terminology, we used plain language translators to simplify legal explanations in order to make the app more usable and more informative for the average user. We hope that enabling family members to use this application will serve two key purposes. The first is in helping to address this problem of overdetention of prisoners. Family members are likely the best resource to act as advocates for addressing this problem of overdetention. We want to empower them to do that by giving them the information and the resources that they need to act as advocates. We provide them with a way to determine when their loved one will be released, with the hope that they will ask questions and make noise in the event that their loved one is held past that date. And we direct them to the offices that they should contact in that event in order to channel their efforts towards successfully combating overdetention. And secondly, we hope that this application, by enabling family members to use it, that they'll be able to better plan and prepare for their loved one's release. So user testing. So we tested with three key different kinds of users. The first was our client as representative of a public defender using the application in the course of their work. We then tested with law students as representative of people who weren't familiar with the application but would be using it for the first time, and also as representative of legal advocates who could help guide a family member through using this application. And then finally, we tested with older non-attorney users in order to sort of simulate what it would be like for the average family member to use the application. And then we incorporated the feedback that we got from all of that user testing into the final build of our application.
So although our app was built for attorneys assisting clients, when we expanded it for family use, we realized that there were other issues we could address, such as re-entry of the clients. Oftentimes, re-entry is overlooked by the public because their main worry is whether the clients would re-offend. But when we looked into it a little bit more, we noticed that there's a level beneath that worry. It's the worry of the client to be ready when they come out. Louisiana's re-entry program found that within the first year, 40% of ex-offenders were returned back to prison. And within 5 years, this rate goes up to 49%. But to get more personal input, we met with one of Georgetown Law's own, Professor Sean Hopwood, famous for his success as a jailhouse lawyer. He explained to us how real the issue of reentry actually is, and also how public defenders' offices aren't always equipped with the resources to be able to provide support. But because we are making this app for a public defender's office, we wanted to change that by providing reentry resources of our own. As of right now, we have over 20 public organizations listed within our app. All these organizations have programs specifically tailored to help ex-offenders get back on their feet. They have programs such as housing, employment, food, mental health, education, and they even help with other legal problems. And this is how our resources look now on the app. Although it's just a list of links and descriptions, we believe that having them readily available for clients and family members is a great step in the right direction in providing support for reentry. And with these resources, we are confident that our app is more than capable of not only assisting attorneys and clients calculate possible release dates, but prepare family members for when that release date comes around. And with the data that this app will collect, we hope that the Public Defender's Office of New Orleans will be able to use it and find a more permanent remedy in the future. And now we are ready for questions.
Okay, I know this is going to be this could be a really stupid question. And I interned in a public defender office back in law school a really long time ago, but my question is, how reliable is the actual calculator? And I don't know because I was thinking about this, well, there's discretion involved, right? So how did you input, how does it all work that your calculator is going to be correct and I'm going to, punch in all the information and it's going to be, 7 to 9 years. And then sure enough, it's perfectly, how does it work? Like, how does the math work?
Yeah, so there's discretion involved, right? But that sort of comes in the actual, we ask for them to input the sentence, right? And that's where a lot of discretion comes in, is what are they actually going to be sentenced for? And are they going to be sentenced as a habitual offender or not as a habitual offender? What our application then does is based off of that sentence and based off of the kind of crime, there are statutes in Louisiana that say whether the person is eligible for parole and what that math looks like, and whether the person's eligible for a good time release and what that math looks like. And then it sort of calculates the final release date. So it sort of accounts for really like the sentencing part of that and the crime determination really go into sort of determining those dates.
Yeah, to quickly follow up on that. So what it takes is a user input from both the charge and the sentence. It converts the sentence to months and then looks at when the release date would be if they had to serve the full sentence, not accounting for any pretrial detention, and then asks the user to input the arrest date, date of release, and you can add up to 4 additional dates of arrest and another release and a conviction date. And in that way, and it will add up all those days and subtract those from the release date it is calculated initially. And for the early release, there's 4 tracks that you can get depending on whether it's good time or parole. It's 25, 35, 65, or 75%. It will take the percentage of that sentence, will again convert that to months, add that to the conviction date, subtract the pretrial detention, and in that way spit out the dates, hopefully within 1 day of what it actually should be. And it explains the math at the end when you click on Give Me My Full Report. It lays out both the calculations as well as the statutes that apply to the charges that you have entered.
I have a follow-up question. I had assumed that this was for people who had already been convicted, knew what their sentence was. It's not something that would have been used by the public defender before the sentence has been imposed. But I had the impression that what you get is a date, and that conveys to me certainty. This is your date. Is it possible to give an accurate date, or are there discretionary elements like whether like parole or early release? To what extent is that decided by authorities who have discretion but aren't required to reduce the sentence.
Sure. So what it really tells them is it helps them in advising their client to say, here's when you will be eligible for parole, like for a parole hearing to come up for parole, right? Certainly that then amounts to discretion in front of a parole board, right? But what we're interested in is helping the public defenders, right, be able to tell their clients, look, if you take this deal, you're going to be eligible for parole or not eligible for parole on this given date. And then, you know, if you don't get parole, this is the last possible date you could get out. You may or may not be eligible for good time release in that period. But the dates, you know, based off of all of the factors are correctly determined and determinative, other than the fact that, yeah, as you know, you're eligible for parole, there's going to be a parole hearing that's going to determine whether you will actually be released on that date.
Exactly. And just to add to that, it also gives you the last possible release date to get you, like, if worst comes to worst, even if you might be eligible, this is when you should be released no matter what. The final report contains all the qualifiers indicating like you can complete programs while you're in prison to further shorten your sentence. Obviously, we cannot input that information at this stage. So it contains, I think, the necessary qualifiers and further gives the final release date so that people give a realistic sense of like you might actually stay in prison until this final date. So in that sense, it both gives you a reason for optimism, but also explains what can happen in the worst case scenario.
So what do the public defenders do now? So without your app, how are they advising clients now?
Back of the envelope.
Yeah.
And it's going to be considerably less accurate than what the app provides, in part because as we experienced in communicating with our client, they often don't know how to classify certain crimes. Certain classifications of crimes as a sex offense are really weird. Some of them, of the violent offense, are really weird and counterintuitive. And furthermore, the way the current charge and the criminal history interacts further complicates that. So they can at best say, like, you're probably eligible for parole, or you're probably eligible for good time. If you don't have a criminal history, I might actually be able to give you the rate at which you would be, what percentage of your sentence you need to complete. But if you have a complicated criminal history, as many clients do, they are basically in the dark.
I'm a family member. I'm using the app to try to get a sense. I think there's a common theme of what happens with the reliability of the information that I get. But once I get that information, what do I do with that information?
So if you see a date that has already passed when you have entered all the information, you're always directed towards the over-detention contact point at the New Orleans Public Defenders. You can just click on it. It will create an email for you with the subject matter, and all you got to do is reach out. They have a dedicated contact point at the New Orleans Public Defender's Office specifically for this problem, given how widespread they think it is. If you see the date is coming up, again, you can reach out to your attorney, and in addition, you're provided with reentry resources to help prepare for your loved one's release.
Thank you very much. Nicely done. Okay, so we're done with the presentations. The justices are going to deliberate for the next 15 minutes. Meanwhile, the social media poll has opened, which means you can vote by going to irontechlawyer.com for your favorite app. And you can only vote once. We've had that problem in previous years, only vote once. Meanwhile, the reception should be set pretty soon-ish, and you have to stop voting by 3:45, which is when we hope the justices will have finished deliberating.
Where do we go? Do we go somewhere? Yeah, we have mics that are on. Do we go somewhere, or we just? Well, we have hot mics. And we have